Some of the material I'll be using today comes from Student Achievement Partners, just so you know, it's the source of some of that, and I'm grateful to them for their Creative Commons licensing, which allows us to use some of the good material being created by folks who were involved with the writing of the Common Core also. When we look at the phases of the Common Core in terms of setting expectations and then monitoring for implementation and ultimately monitoring for student performance, I think just like the stages that we know of teacher development, there are stages of systems development around implementation of anything, but in this case of the Common Core. And I think it's important to pay attention to what would we see individuals doing and what would we see colleagues or groups of people doing in relation to each of these phases. So the first phase is the vision phase, and the questions, and you can add to these, but the questions are the shifts understood? And so one of the questions for you as you think about setting your vision and setting the metrics is, are the shifts of the Common Core understood? And I'm going to share Vermont's version of those with you in just a minute. And are the standards understood? What opportunities are teachers and administrators having to read and look at those standards together? To pay attention to just the math practice standards or just the standards for short reports or whatever it is, to say, do we really know what these standards are and what they call for? Are we paying enough attention to that? So that kind of is the awareness stage, and then moving into early implementation, because I can't move to early implementation in my classroom or in my school until I know what it is that what is it that this is really calling for? What do the standards themselves demand of me as a teacher or as a principal? In this case, so individuals know the shifts and are ready to implement those and are really thinking about what's the impact this has on my work? What does this mean for me? They are also trying out some strategies as we move to application and experimentation. And that's where a lot of places are now. Some of you are just beyond that to the next stage. But are teachers really taking on, trying out, teaching and assessing the standards in the classroom? And until we get to that point, we're not going to have any impact on students. So we'd see individuals trying things out, and then we'd see colleagues collaborating and sharing what works, talking about that in PLCs or grade level meetings or department meetings or whatever. So that's the first phase, I think, of implementation. The second phase is ownership. When do they really become ours? Are local expectations articulated? And that's what we're going to focus on today. What are your local expectations, and are they clear to everyone? What are the structures? Are the structures and processes in the plan in place to support implementation? What's going to need to happen locally to make this really happen? And are the criteria and exemplars used to select and implement resources and strategies? What are the criteria for selecting your next textbooks? Are you looking beyond, whether Common Core is on the cover? Because we know there's some issues with that. So we'd see individuals who are able individually to judge resources, and teachers. We talked in a group some earlier this week around the state about what it means to be able to identify complex text. Can teachers in your district do that? Do they know the difference between a math textbook that has truly narrowed the focus for mathematics and one that has not, in terms of selection of resources and so forth? So colleagues are engaged in collaborative inquiry around some of those questions, because it really takes a group together looking at that to decide, are we meeting our local expectations? Are we working with resources and so forth? And then phase 3 is performance, where it really starts to happen. And to have it really start to happen with students in the classroom, there needs to be in place, we've got to take the standards to routine use. If the standards are not in routine use in the classroom, it is no surprise that the scores would dip on whatever the assessment is, if it's an assessment that's tied to those standards. And then advocacy and innovation. Are they the opportunities for folks to be moving out and making suggestions for what could work better than what we already have? So individuals, routine practice, the standards are fully integrated into routine practice in the classroom. And you'd see that in walkthroughs, you'd see it in teacher evaluation, you'd see it in dialogues, and you'd see it in student work. You'd see it in the kinds of things that students are talking about. Individuals are able to support the development of their colleagues. There's some people you can call on, and you have some of those people already in your schools and districts, but you would have more of them over time. And then, what are colleagues doing together? Colleagues are identifying patterns of effective practice and student performance to fine-tune their classroom practice. So we're going to be looking today at phase 2, expectations being articulated, and beginning to go to phase 3. I'm going to give you 3 options. It's not the whole universe of options, but 3 options to think about in terms of how colleagues working together can monitor the implementation and learn together about it. Let me give you just a couple of minutes at your tables to talk about what you notice on that chart. Where do you see yourselves as being in relation to it? And are there any questions you have? So just a couple of minutes to talk about that, or to keep finding it if you need to on the website in the PowerPoint slides. Okay, so where are you from vision, ownership, performance, and what are people doing in your school at the moment? 2 minutes to have a conversation about that.